Looking forward to it.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Global Women's Leadership Summit session with Christine Wattie. Before we get started, I'm going to just check to make sure you can hear me. So if you can hear me, either raise your hand or type your country and city into the question box, and that way we know that somewhere out there people can hear the amazing content that we're about to give you. I'm going to wait a moment for those to come in. While you're doing that, my name is Mary Lagakis-Engel, and I am the co-founder and managing director of the Global Women's Leadership Summit. I am thrilled to have you all here with us for this final day of the summit. It's so great to have you here. Christine, we have people dialing in from Europe, it's quite late for you, and Canada and the US, and it's so wonderful to see everybody. I want to thank everybody for being with us and for participating in such an important mission, the professional advancement of women around the world. As you know, we have a big mission ahead of us to dramatically impact the leadership capability and prosperity of over 5 million women leaders by 2020. And that's a big mission. So Grant and I would like to invite all of you to help us with that mission and carry on with the learning and the development that you've gained here this week and last week from all of our incredible presenters from all around the world. We recently finished our pre-summit, our first week of the full summit, our second week of the full summit. It is all recorded. It is all stored in the member portal along with slides, executive notes, the video recording, and all of our presenter freebies, which are in the member portal for you to download. And if for any reason you can't access those resources, maybe you have a basic level ticket and you'd like to upgrade, you can email us at support@gwalls.com to upgrade your ticket. So before we begin, before I introduce the fabulous Christine Wattie, I want to make sure that you're all paying close attention, that you're present, that you've turned off your cell phone ringers, your email distractions, your televisions, your office distractions, and really pay close attention to what you're going to learn here, because this is how we're going to make a difference. If you have questions, please go ahead and ask them as we go, and Christine is going to take pauses at various points in her presentation to answer your questions. And if for any reason we can't answer your question before the end of the session, you know where to find us. We're in the LinkedIn private group, in the Facebook private group, and on the Facebook page at facebook.com/Global Women's Leadership Summit. You can ask your questions there, and Christine will be online to answer those for you. Let's make sure you make this last day count and find something in this presentation that you can take action on in the next 24 hours, even if it's just one thing. So I am now going to introduce Christine. You may recognize the last name. She is, in fact, married to the one and only Grant Wattie. But let me tell you her incredible experience. She is a professional senior facilitator and executive coach currently working at IMNZ, an iconic New Zealand organization that has been developing leaders for almost 70 years. Her diverse background includes business leadership, management, and professional development in New Zealand, Australia, and globally, and with the Global Women's Leadership Summit. Christine's innovative, solution-focused work is supported by her positive regard and genuine empathy towards all people and a passion for unlocking potential and getting results. Her business experience is supported by qualifications in coaching, facilitation, adult education, counseling, and horticulture science. She's a professional member of NZAC and an accredited human synergistics practitioner. Christine's clients have ranged from senior business leaders and executives through to emerging leaders, royalty, ambassadors, universities, students, families, and indigenous peoples in Malaysia, Chile, New Zealand, and Australia. Everybody, it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you Christine Wattie. Please join me in welcoming her to the summit.
Thank you so much, Mary, and a big thank you to the fabulous mission that you and your lovely team of supporters are currently helping you with, because I know it is such an important mission. And welcome as well to everybody who's on this webinar today. Good morning to those of you who are in New Zealand and Australia, and it's good evening to those of you who are in USA and Canada, and to everybody from around the globe. It's a big welcome to this webinar, and this is a really important topic. I know in my work as a therapist, as a coach, and on a personal level, I do see mental health, a mental health crisis, and that's why it's such an important topic. We can all play a part in the solution, and we need skills and awareness. And if I think about my own personal situation, just recently having moved back to New Zealand from Australia, there are stresses that occur in life that all of us will face, and we need strategies to rise above the mental health challenges that we experience. So where are we going here on our session today? We're going to start looking at our own mental health. As leaders, it's always important to put on our self-awareness for ourselves before we start looking at others. Then we're going to look at resilience strategies, and then we'll turn to helping others, assisting others, looking at organisational strategies, and leave some time at the end for your own actions. As Mary said, even if you just take away one thing that you can put into practice in the next 24 hours, that would be a really positive outcome from my perspective. And there'll be space to ask questions, not only at the end, but throughout the presentation. And I'd like to begin today thinking about your objectives. What are the mental health issues that you're facing, or perhaps someone that's close to you in the workplace or at home is facing? Is there something that's drawn you to attending this session today? And if there is, please feel free to write that in the chat box there now. Now, as the presenter, I can't see the chat box, I can't see your questions, but I'd like you to think about this. What is the reason that you've joined this webinar today? And I'll ask Mary to relay your questions to me, or your comments there. So just write your comments in the chat box now.
Okay. I'm gonna read those out to you in a moment when I've got a few of them typed in. So you're looking for people to type in what their interest is primarily in this session as it pertains to any mental health challenges or experiences that they're having currently in their own lives. So feel free to share, everybody. I won't name names, so you just put your comments in and let's see what you all share, in common.
Great. Thank you, Mary.
No problem. I will cut in when we have a few responses in. I know they're all just typing away right now.
Okay, that's great. So I will just carry on here and make sure we're all very clear about what mental health is. Now, I've got a definition here from the World Health Organization as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So that's a really robust definition, and there are a number of different ways of determining mental health. And in this session here today, we're going to be looking at mental health as a continuum. So thinking about ranging from good mental health at one end to mental health at the other end. And people will vary their position along this continuum at different points in their life. You know, a person with great mental health will really feel in control of their emotions, and someone at the other end will be at the opposite end. And when we're in good mental health, we can perform well at work and in our family and other social situations. So Mary, did we have any responses there at this point?
I think people are a little shy. There's a lot of people on the session, so I'm going to kick it off if you don't mind, Christine, and I'm just going to make a couple of the situations that I face, and one of the reasons why I feel so strongly that we include mental health education in both the summit and in the Global Women's Leadership Program is I have clients that come to me who are experiencing depression, emotional turmoil, etc., and they come to me because they can't tell anybody that they work with, or they can't tell their family. And then I have, of course, in my own family, a history of depression, and my brother has schizophrenia, and so looking at how that happens in the workplace. And of course, my brother has been working for years with my father at the at a business that they serve together, and so the understanding and awareness of how you accommodate mental health in the workplace is really important for me. So hopefully that inspires some of you to think through what it is that you are joining this session for. And if you could type into the question box, people are still signing in, Christine, this is great. If you could type into the question box the thing that you are curious about or the situation that you're facing around mental health, that would be great. And
thank you.
We do have one response. I'll let you know what it is from Maud. Oh wait, I said I wasn't going to mention names. Sorry, you're out, Maud. Too late. She says she's interested in hints about how to strengthen our mental health in situations, in heavy situations in the work environment. Great.
So can you just repeat that, Mary, so that we're all really clear?
Yeah, she's interested in hints about how to strengthen our mental health in heavy situations in work environment.
Yeah, so strengthening in heavy situations in the work environment, and that's absolutely where we'll be heading. So what we're going to be looking at is a little bit of context around mental health, and then we'll be looking at strategies. I think that is the really important part of the session. So we'll be heading there very shortly. So thank you for contributing there. And thank you, Mary, as well, for, really personalising this and bringing it close to home, because I think with mental health, it's not an if, it's a when, that you or someone will be experiencing a mental illness. And if we have a look at these statistics here, healthy workers are much more productive. So we've got here 3 times more productive according to a recent study by Medicare, 5 times more engaged and likely to stay with an organisation, 2.5 times more likely to say that the organisation they're with is creative and innovative, and how important that is today with constant change. Also, healthy workers are happier, and that's comes from Martin Seligman's work in his recent book on Flourish. Mental health is a really big issue. Almost half of adults will experience a mental illness at some point in their life, and a fifth will experience a mental illness in any given year. Now, those statistics are Australian. However, for those of you in other parts of the world, I'm sure that your statistics will be very similar to that. Most of the developed world has statistics that correlate very strongly with that. So it is a very big issue, and that's why it's such an important issue. The other thing is, though, that it's an issue that many people keep under wraps, and they're not very comfortable talking about. And for me personally, it is something that I've experienced in my family too, with especially anxiety and depression. My mum suffered from anxiety as we were growing up, and that was clinical anxiety at various points in her life, and another close family member struggles with depression on an ongoing basis. So there are things that we can do about these things, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. So as leaders and managers, we do need to start with ourselves. We need to be self-aware so that we can consciously take action to build our own mental health. That really is an essential precursor to helping others. But what are the signs that we look for? Basically, we look for a change. So I've got up here on the slide here some of the symptoms of burnout, some of the things that we might be experiencing if we are struggling with mental health. They can be things like physical, mental and emotional exhaustion. Not just the regular tiredness that we have because we've put in a good day at work, but that absolute exhaustion, impatience and irritable, just about small things that normally wouldn't bother us. We can't concentrate and we can't remember things easily. Perhaps we're feeling a lack of self-esteem or confidence when we're normally quite bouncy and there's a noticeable change. Or our appetite has either increased or decreased significantly. So we're absolutely not hungry at all or eating a lot more, and especially of the wrong things. We might be sick frequently. Our work quality going down. We're just not quite getting there with our work. Perhaps we're arriving late and leaving early because we're just feeling that exhaustion. So some of these things can compound on each other. And we really don't want to be at work. So my question to those of you on the course here, another question is, which of these symptoms have you experienced in the last little while? Is there something there that is symptoms that you have been experiencing? If there is, write that in the chat box. So
I'm not going to let them get away with this one because I know for sure at least 80% of them could say yes to the last one.
That's right.
That's great. It's interesting, the one around appetite. I can actually tell when my mental health is starting to decrease in terms of loss of self-esteem or self-confidence or anything like that, because I start to get sugar cravings and my diet just changes, and it's these small subtle little hints that I have to pay attention to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and finding some balance. That's
really good to hear, Mary. And you know, something really interesting is that I have exactly the opposite experience. When I'm really feeling stress, then I just can't eat. Things to me taste like cardboard and I just don't have no appetite whatsoever. And at the moment we're staying in a house with there's 5 of us here, and one of the people in the house, her grandma just died, very sadly, over in the UK a couple of weeks ago. And what's happened with her is that things that she would normally just take in her stride, she's become a lot more impatient and irritable about small little things, which, I'm bringing that up because this is a normal response. This is a normal thing that would happen. We're grieving someone that's very close to us. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we have a mental illness if we have some of these symptoms. It's about being aware that something has changed for us and taking some steps to do something different about, change something, to allow ourselves perhaps in this instance to grieve and to support ourselves in other ways. And that's what we're going to be moving on to shortly. So Mary, was there anybody else who's typed into the chat box at this stage?
Yes, there are a few. So can't concentrate is typed in by a few people. Lack of concentration and recognition in my job, change of appetite, and impatient and irritable. So yeah, everybody experiences it, and I like how you described it at the beginning, that we're going to look at it in the form of a continuum, because people sometimes may feel like the subject of mental health is a binary. It's either yes or no, and in fact it's not really either or. That's right.
And that's what we're looking at here. And the great news is that if we become aware, more self-aware, then we can do something about it. Many times, if I know with my mum, for example, she was a really busy mum, trying to work in the workplace as well as raise us 4 children and do many other things at the same time. And she was just a bit on a bit of a treadmill, and she didn't stop to take care of herself as she needed to do at the time, and that progressed into an anxiety disorder. And I think that's the thing that we want to stop here, is to become aware that something has changed. So the good news here is that from awareness we can do something about it. and that's where resilience comes in. And what is resilience? I like this definition I've got up here on the slide. The capacity to rebound from adversity, strengthened and more resourceful. So we're not looking here in this webinar as having no stress. I don't think that's a reality in today's world, but it's about being able to bounce back from stress and be strengthened and more resourceful. And I really like that little picture of that flower there in the desert on the slide, coming from a horticultural background when I first left school. You know, plants are very close to my heart, and I know that you could be growing that plant in a greenhouse and it would be tall and green with lots and lots of flowers on. But if you put that same flower out in the desert, what would happen? It would just wither up and die. And yet that little plant on the screen there now in the desert is flowering, it's strong, it's going to resist anything, it's strong and it will bounce back. And that's what we're looking for here in our session. And how do we build resilience? First step, awareness. Recognising your own stress signals and identifying the causes of the stress. So we've already identified some of the stress signals that we're experiencing. Second step is action. What are some of the strategies that we can take to build resilience and to reduce stress? And that's where we're heading today. And we're going to be looking at 3 strategies. The first one is emotional intelligence, second one is looking at thinking, and the third one is self-care. So with emotional intelligence, I love the metaphor of a traffic light. And the traffic light really is an indicator, as emotions are, of what's going on. So now I'd just invite each of you on the call to think, to do a little audit of yourself. What emotions are you experiencing right now? Are you in the green space where you're calm, relaxed, happy and content? Or are you moving up into that amber light, that yellow space? And this is really the key of emotional intelligence, is noticing when you're moving out of the green into the amber. Now I know for myself there have been a lot of changes that have gone on in the last 3 months actually. I've moved countries, I've moved house, I'm just about to move house again. I've come back to family and left other family behind. I'm organising a wedding for my daughter, and there's a lot going on for me. And I was speaking to my brother just last week on the phone, and he's a neurologist, and he said to me, Chris, can I just make a comment? And he said, you're talking really fast. Are you okay? And for me that was an indicator that I was potentially at that amber level. It was a very slight observation, but that's what we wanted to do, is to note when we're getting into that amber zone, what are the physical, emotional signs that you're experiencing and that are different from when you're in the green zone. And why is that important? Because when we get up into the red, that's when we destroy relationships. That's when we do the things that we really wish we hadn't. You know, we can be like either the tiger or the turtle, you know, the one who lashes out or the one that goes into their shell and hides away. So the key is to notice and to take action. And what can we do when we notice that we're at the amber stage? Invite you, everybody on the call, to type into the chat box some of the things that you do when you notice that you're moving up into that amber space. What are some of the things that you might do? And I know for me, one of the things that I like to do is to get out into nature. And just this morning, Grant and I went down to the beach, and we walked along the beach and sat there and had a coffee, which I find absolutely, you know, a real key for making me feel well. And I can't see those the chat box, but I'm going to ask Mary to relay to me any other strategies that are coming up in the box there.
Coping strategies, things that bring us back into balance. And while they're typing those in, I'll share my own.
Thank you, Mary.
For sure, it's a hot bath in Epsom salts. I love that. That totally gets me right back to where I need to be. Others say sports or a party gets them where they need to be. If I can get up and go for a walk around the building or go and get a large glass of water and drink it, that's another strategy. Great. There you go, Christine. We've got some great strategies.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. And thank you, Mary. And I think that brings up that there are some things that we can do in the long term.
Here's my favorite one. Crocheting and quilting and walking the trails.
Great. Yeah, so all of us, we're all unique and we will all have different things that we will love to do. So crochet and quilting, fabulous. Walking the trails, I'm right with that one too. And some of the strategies that we have are long term, so we build them into our well-being. In the long term, others are, like walking around the block or taking a quick break for coffee can be more in the moment. Another couple that I find especially helpful are getting a good night's sleep. I know I'm a much more effective if I've had a really good night's sleep. And sometimes just as well chatting to a friend or a colleague about can keep things in perspective. So are there any more there, Mary, or we've covered them all? I love that crochet one.
I love it too. And healthy food came up as well.
Yes, absolutely. So good diet is so important. So that's emotional intelligence, looking at where you are. Emotions are indicators. What is the one thing that you can do to improve your emotional intelligence? That's my challenge to you all here today on the call. What's the one thing that you could do today, within the next 24 hours, that you could do to look after yourself? So perhaps take a moment to write that down. If you'd like to, you're welcome to share that in the chat box, but just think, okay, to make the best use of this time that we have together here, is there something that I could do to improve my mental health in the emotional space? Now, emotions and thoughts are very closely linked. You aren't your thoughts. Often our thoughts are very become, that inner voice can go round and round telling you things that and you start to ruminate. I like the story of the tiger. If we think about the tiger in the jungle, if we see a tiger, we feel the fear, and our thoughts, normal thoughts if we saw a tiger would be to run. And that's a very normal fight-flight response. It's a natural response. It shows that we care about something, and what do we care about if we see a tiger? We care about survival, don't we? However, what happens often is that those thoughts can go where what we say is below the line, where we go into that space where we blame, we make excuses, we deny, discount, or become defensive. And this is a place where we all go from time to time, but it's not a helpful place to stay. So to check out our thoughts and to make the choice to move them up above the line where we take ownership, accountability and responsibility is a really effective mental health strategy. In fact, just recently I've been looking at some research that was recently done in the UK Biomed study, where 500,000 people, adults, were analysed over 5 years. What they found was the strongest predictor of longevity and well-being was self-reported health. That's how healthy we think we are. Now, I thought that was really amazing. Our thoughts have such an important part in our overall health. How healthy we think we are was the strongest predictor. And yet for those people who are struggling with mental health issues, those thoughts can go round and round in circles. If we think about, telling you a story, you walk into an office and your manager and a colleague have been chatting away and they stop talking abruptly. You think, oh no, I've done a terrible job with that report, I should have done it better. And they're sure to be going to talking about how they're going to break the news to me that I'm not going to be employed beyond my probation period. Now that's an example of jumping to negative conclusions, and the shoulds, I should have done it better. We can, these are the sorts of things that will be going on in our thinking when thinking is our challenge. What can we do to, in this sort of situation? To look at it more rationally, we separate our thoughts from who we are. So as I said at the beginning, we are not our thoughts. So bring to awareness this situation. What are we feeling? So again, connecting with our feeling, we're feeling fear. And the thoughts, I'm not good enough. They'll end my probation. What is it that we value here? So in this instance, it's likely to be that we want to keep our job, that we want that security. So what do we do about this? Some of the strategies that we could use is go and have a chat to our manager or to a friend. Get a more another perspective on it. And this is certainly something that I've used. The lesson learned here is to look at the facts, don't jump to conclusions, and be proactive, not a victim. So the third strategy that we're going to be looking at here today is self-care. So I really like this Stephen Covey's who wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the circle of influence and the circle of concern that I've got there up on the slide. When we're thinking about self-care and well-being, one of the things that proactive people really do focus on is the things that they can influence. So it's no good trying to focus on things that we're concerned about that we can't influence. So examples of things that we might be concerned about that we can't influence could be things like the state of the economy, the refugee crisis if you're in Australia or New Zealand or other parts of the world where that's a crisis. Global warming. There are some examples of things that we may be concerned about but we can't influence. What we need to focus on is things that are in our circle of influence. And when we're thinking resilience and mental health, what are some of the things that we can focus on? So I've got a couple of ideas up there on the slide, and we've already had being healthy, so healthy diet, healthy lifestyle, things that we've talked about. I've got up there making time for fun and relaxation. Fun is really important, relaxation too. And I'm wondering if others of you have got some things that you could add in the chat box there, and Mary can relay those to me. What are some of the other things that you can do to look after yourself?
This could get really fun. I'm thinking pedicures, I'm thinking massages, I'm thinking, I can't wait to hear what others do because I would like to steal some ideas. I am on the market for ideas. So go ahead and type in there, what are some things that you do for self-care? Let's see those come in. Christine, what do you do for self-care?
Self-care, yes, going to the hairdresser and having my hair cut and coloured and just sitting there with a lovely book and a cup of coffee. Those kind of things really can make us feel good, can't they, Mary?
They sure
Or getting a good movie and a glass of wine. Mm-hmm. Mind you, it is the one glass of wine, not the 2 or 3. Then it could be everything in moderation.
Well, even things like snuggling with a loved one or having a pet. For some people, that's what it is. Let's see, for others, a nice cup of tea, going for a drive, listening to music, taking the dogs for a walk, others saying reading. Yeah. Self-care, let me see here. Health, looking after others as well.
Yes, yes. And the list, it can be fun and it is endless, and I think, you know, it's, when we're thinking about well-being, it is a continuum, and what we're looking at here is we, as women, we need the resilience to last the distance. And thinking about the continuum, what is the one self-care thing that we can do to move ourselves one space along that continuum so that we're just a little more able to cope with these stresses and strains of everyday living? And that's my challenge to you. Which of those suggestions, or you may have another one that you can please feel free to put in the box there, is it that you're going to do as a result of this session today? Just creating the space for yourselves today where you can think about your well-being is another example of self-care. So why is this all so important to us as leaders and as managers? Really, I think it's a really important role because we are role models, we act as role models, and we have the ability to create a supportive culture. And we can really help others in this role. We can step up and take action with other people who are struggling with their mental health and well-being. And that's where I want to move to now, because I know a lot of people think, well, I'm okay, you know, my mental health's okay, and yet there might be people around us who aren't doing so well. And that's why I've got a list here of common signs of mental health in others. Because in many cases, workers won't disclose a mental health condition, but you may be able to notice changes in their behaviour that indicate they might be experiencing some sort of distress. And this is really important to us because people will be struggling, and remember I said it's not if, it's when. What are some of the things that you can look for? So I've got the absenteeism, you know, taking long weekends and lots of sick days, presenteeism, turning up at work but coming late and leaving early, and KPIs, key performance indicators, starting to fluctuate and then decline. Withdrawal behaviour is another one, not socialising and avoiding those staff meetings with excuses why they can't come. Increased irritability, you know, that snappy, overreactive, especially over minor things that people would normally be able to cope with. Cranky, aggressive, looking really tired, monotone speech, sort of appearing distressed. High or exaggerated emotions is another one to look for. You know, more teary, anxious, angry, fearful, sad, and lots of mood swings. So that's one that you might see. Lacking in concentration is another one. Not remembering things, being forgetful, and you're coming back to the thinking, you know, either catastrophizing and awfulizing things, assuming the worst, can't see the positives, or scatty thinking, you know, irrational thinking, using substances such as caffeine, alcohol, hopefully not at work, and more smoking examples there. Extreme behaviour, you know, inappropriate behaviour. We've talked about changes in eating, and agitation, so the talking fast, pacing, tapping, shaking, you know, fidgety. So those are some of the things that could give you an indication that people who aren't coming out and saying they've got a mental health condition, but you're noticing that there's something different going on for them. So again, relating this to your own situation, is there something with someone that you care about going on? And I know as I was preparing for this, I suddenly thought, yes, the person that whose grandma's died, as I mentioned earlier, you know, she is struggling with some of these things. So, you know, think, while it might not be a mental health condition at the moment, the definition of mental health from a clinical perspective is 2 or more of these things over a period of a couple of weeks or more. So thinking, okay, being aware of that. And what can we do about it? And this is the important thing. I've got a lovely mnemonic, algae, mental health first aid. So what can we do? Don't assume these issues will just go away. So the A is for approach, assess and assist. Okay, so approaching and asking the person, you know, would they like to chat about things is the first step. And assist, if there is a crisis, that has to be the highest priority. You know, check that there's not a danger of safety for themselves or somebody else. So the first step is always to approach, assess and assist. After that, these other steps are not necessarily in order, but listening is a really important one. So listening to what's going on. Most people who are experiencing distressing emotions and thoughts really want to be listened to empathetically before being given lots of advice. So, you know, that empathic listening, hear them out, give them some space. And next, it's about support, giving support, offering them support and information. Perhaps that's emotional support and practical help with any tasks that just might seem overwhelming at that moment. And also ask if they'd like some information about mental health solutions at that stage. Then encouraging appropriate professional help is the next step. We're not, most of us aren't professional counsellors or therapists, and that wouldn't be a part of our roles. However, pointing them in the direction of where to get that professional help is an important step. And lastly, encouraging other supports. So that could be family, that could be friends, that could also be cultural support if they're of a culture different to you, and it could be support for yourself, because helping people who are challenged with mental health first aid can in fact be very draining on yourself. So that goes back to the self-care that we were talking about before. So just a couple more points and then I'm going to open it up to questions here, because I know that this is something that's really important to a lot of people who are working in management and leadership, is how do we help others? And one of the issues is around underperformance. So how do we manage mental health related underperformance? Well, first step is apply the algae that we've just talked about. And then it's about addressing the issues sensitively with a win-win focus. So we really are looking for a win for you and your organisation, and a win for the other person. So coming from that perspective is always really helpful. It's not all about my way or the highway. It's about working out something that will work for both. So something that we talk about a lot in New Zealand is reasonable work-related adjustments with a timeline. So, you know, when somebody is struggling with mental health and they've been a great employee over a length of time, and then they're struggling, you know, make some work-related adjustments if possible with a timeline. And if there's a personality issue then involved, then perhaps you'll consider mediation or other support as well. So last slide before we go to questions is really, what can we do as leaders and managers about creating a positive work environment? And this is one that I'm really happy to talk about, having just moved back to New Zealand and working for a fabulous organisation where they really do create a positive work environment. So I'm speaking from fabulous experience here, where an organisational wellbeing strategy can be something that you might be able to contribute to. Now at IMNZ we have a wellbeing allowance that we can spend on anything that we like, which I feel very, very fortunate to be in that situation. A lot of the employees in fact join the gym that's right next door, so and we go on lunchtime, so it breaks up the day. Other things that we can do around wellbeing are flexible work practices, such as working from home if that's appropriate. And actually a participant on one of my courses this week said once she'd had the busy end of month, what she does is bring in a massage therapist to to support the workers who've often worked very long hours for a few days at busy month end. So there's lots of things that we can do around wellbeing in our organisations. We also need to be mindful that we are a role model, to lead by example, and that's why I started with thinking about our own health and wellbeing first. Then to make sure we communicate very clearly and that we proactively support our own and others' mental health and wellbeing. So as we close, I do really invite you to be challenged to think about how you can support more effectively your own mental health and wellbeing and that of your colleagues, your team members, or perhaps it might be on a personal level for you, people that you live with and love. And with that, I am going to invite you to write those ideas down. The research suggests that what we write down we're much more likely to achieve, with a timeline as well. So what are you going to do to support your own or others' mental health and wellbeing following this webinar today? And I'm going to now open it up for questions from you, because I think this is the part that's really important, where we can relate this to your own personal situations. And I know, Mary, you've got a lot of expertise in this area too, so if you've got questions for either myself or for Mary, then we would love to hear those questions from you at this point.
Amazing, Christine. These techniques and these tips are so needed in the world of work. So everybody, post your questions. We have a professional on the line, the person who has the answers. So she is a counselor. She helps people with exactly these items. You know, Christine, as you were presenting, I was thinking of a couple of clients of mine who have, now they're executives, and they have people on their teams who are very clearly suffering from some of the symptoms that you listed on that previous slide. And but what happens is you come in and you start listening, and then you start asking questions and uncovering some of the symptoms, but the leaders don't actually understand or know that it's tied to mental health, that what they are likely facing is somebody who is having personal challenges in a business environment. And so these two gentlemen that I'm thinking of, and they're both from different companies, will approach it from a very rational, logical place of not understanding mental health, and they'll treat it like every other employee situation.
Yes.
So I think what's happened is they're so well trained in how do you treat normal, regular situations in work, that they're trying to apply the same behavior when the same behavior is actually probably going to produce worse results.
Absolutely.
Now, what are your thoughts around how do you help people distinguish between or understand that the situation may call for a different set of behaviors?
That's a great question, Mary, and I think, the thing that we really need to have is education on this. There has been quite a bit in Australia and New Zealand in particular around mental health over the particularly last couple of years. Taking away the stigma, I think, is really important, and one of the ways that we can do that as managers and leaders is actually having some basic knowledge, educating ourselves with some basic knowledge about mental health issues, so that we can recognise the signs and the issues when they're developing, because if we just treat them the same as everything else, as you say, the the results can be disastrous. And yet, just like if we break a leg or do anything else, there's a process for recovery and healing. It's absolutely the same with mental health, and yet for some reason it has been stigmatized, and people have tended to be very reluctant to talk about it. So I think education, educating ourselves and sitting on a webinar like this and doing some reading and looking on our good friend Google, are really good strategies for educating ourselves about what these issues are, looking at the signs, and then applying something like the algae process. It's approaching, don't just ignore it, listen with empathy, and then giving support in the various ways that we talked about earlier. So I think it does need to be approached in a slightly different way than how a rational business owner would address other issues. And doing that, we're going to be looking after our employees, really looking after our organisations too. If we've got loyal employers who are just set back by whatever the issue is, then we're on the road. Does that answer your question, Mary?
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting because when you do start to pay attention, I think there are certain characteristics of the people that are able to address those situations. What does it take for a manager or a leader to be able to apply the ALGAE acronym? What are some of the characteristics that they need to show?
Well, I think this is a good question too, because I think if we take the rational business approach to dealing with things and think, okay, issue and solution, we might be missing the boat completely. I think what we really need is we need to have what Carl Rogers talks about as genuine empathy and unconditional positive regard. So those would be characteristics that I would bring to the conversation, especially in the first two stages. So when we're approaching the person and we're listening, then what we want to be doing is coming from a perspective that we are empathetic towards them, that we're listening without judgment, really listening to hear. We haven't formed a judgment and we're looking for a solution. We want to really hear that person deeply. And I think all of us know when someone's spoken to us, when we're speaking with someone and they're really listening to us, not just listening to us and thinking about their own solution, that's halfway to the solution often, to be really heard. And remember, people with these mental health issues can feel very overwhelmed. They can't find a solution on their own. So what they need is to be heard and then to be gently given a few options of things, of ways they might like to proceed, which could include seeing a counsellor. It could include, conversation with somebody else. So whichever the support that might be appropriate in that situation. But I think coming from that place where we're non-judgmental, we're genuine, we're empathetic, are a good place to start as far as characteristics are concerned.
And I love the phrase unconditional positive regard. We heard a bit about that from Paula Fellingham earlier today. She was talking about really just holding that person in positive regard and realizing that they do have strengths and things that they're amazing at. We do have a question here about the difference between depression and burnout. What is the difference? Are they the same?
I think they're, the truth, it's like we said, it's a continuum, and there will be different signs and symptoms. And but if we think about depression really is about low mood and feeling like the whole world's on our shoulders and not being able to get out of bed perhaps in the morning, feeling very negative about life in general, when we normally have lots of energy, we're feeling that, that heaviness, that weight. So that's where I'd say, that for me, that's where depression sits. Whereas burnout, if we go back to burnout, that's more of a, it's more of a slang term, if you like. We're feeling burnt out. It can be depression, but it can also be some other things as well. So, burnout could be just exhaustion, that physical exhaustion, and that inability to concentrate, being sick a lot, lack of appetite. So if you're suffering from burnout, it's not necessarily depression. It could be. So that would be how I'd answer that. Can you add anything else to that, Mary, do you think?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say is that burnout is not quite as severe as depression. And I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that when we start talking about clinical depression, we are starting to talk about physical changes in chemistry, in mental capacity, in health. You start to feel physical pain. You start to have thoughts about suicide. So clinical depression really starts to get serious. Burnout may just be an early sign that you are tiring your body too much, and that you're on the path to actually potentially changing that physical chemistry that could eventually end up in some form of depression. Is that?
Yeah, and I think, yes, I think I agree. And burnout isn't necessarily a clinical term. It's just, burnout, we're feeling burnt out. Definitely it's a sign, it's a symptom, something to watch out for. Whereas clinical depression, again, it's on a continuum, so it can be from mild depression through to hospitalised. So there is a continuum even where that is. Yes.
Wonderful.
So I think between us, Mary, we've probably got there with that one. I'm certainly hoping so.
Hopefully we answered your question. Good.
Yes.
It's a tricky subject, and she says, yes, we did. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
It is great. It is a tricky subject, but the thing is that organizations, I know up here in Canada, there's been research that says that 60% or 67% of managers and leaders would love to be able to have the skills and abilities to handle mental health in the workplace, but less than 30% will even broach the subject or go there. So it's still such early days. I mean, we have one battle to fight, which is gender equality, and I think the next horizon is going to be this mental health aspect that that's going to follow on as a big initiative in the world very soon.
Yeah, and I think, Mary, it's not something that's decreasing. I think from my experience and working in a number of countries as I have, it seems to me that more is expected. It's this 24/7, always on. I think that this is becoming a huge issue. So it's this awareness and action. If I go back to where we started, first of all, being aware for ourselves and others. What are the signs? What are the things to look for? And then action. What can we do for ourselves, and what can we do for others? And the RG process, don't sit back and assume it's going to go away. Approach that person. And maybe it is just listening and then helping them find the professional who is able to support them, because maybe it's not you, but maybe it is. And I think the more that we can learn the skills of communication, effective communication, which is to really listen, and listen with empathy and positive regard, then we're a long way along the way to helping that person. And Nitin Noria, Harvard professor, said communication is the real work of leadership, and I tend to agree with that. Thinking, if we can communicate effectively, then we can certainly be leading really effectively too.
Wonderful. Well, Christine, what I think I'm taking away from here the most is that if we can start to understand the if we can start to understand how mental health works, and you've given us some incredible strategies here with the 3 strategies that you've given us around thinking, around self-care, those 3 strategies, if we can start to understand how it works for ourselves and start to become sensitive to the signals that we can then start to understand how it works for others, and that will put us in a better position to empathize and listen and apply those tools. I think that's the starting point for me. You have been a tremendous resource for us. Thank you so much for taking the time to present this topic. It's one that's near and dear to my heart, I know, and we hope that everybody, when you do have questions, you go ahead and post them in the LinkedIn group and in the Facebook group. You can also reach out to Christine. She works with us. Hey, she's part of the family. So if you do have any questions, she's around. We look forward to seeing you on our final session about 1 hour from now. I will be hosting it and presenting it. It is Outpace Your Peer, how to build the career strategy that gets you promoted. That is our final session of the summit. So we want to thank you all. We'll see you online. And Christine, if there was just one thought that you could leave us with before we head off, what would it be?
Well, I thought about that before the session, Mary, and I have a quote from a Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu, that I would just like to share in closing, and that is, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become habits, and watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. So thank you all for your participation. Thank you for your questions. Thank you to you, Mary. You're doing an absolutely amazing job. I know your final session will be amazing too, as you are, always. So go well, everybody, and be well. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.